and I mean, everything, and I feel like I'm going to die. You can't do, you fatigue your body with the machines, and you literally can't do another set after 4 sets. And what's great about the biofeedback, and what we're learning so much now with biofeedback, and in fact, tomorrow I'm bringing my doctor that does brainwave biofeedback. So we're going to talk about neurology and what we're learning about the brain and neural pathways. And the brain is fascinating, and so much when we talk about, when we're talking about wealth, the wealthy piece, is we spend a lot of time again on diet and exercise and thinking, and mostly exercising, and we just have to exercise to health. And we're doing too much exercise. It's actually counter-effective because it's throwing up our adrenals and our cortisol. So what the science is telling us now, it's better to do high intensity but low duration. So really shrink down the amount of hours we have to put in to work out every single week, but really throw up that intensity. And so that's like the ARX machine that you guys saw that. It's maxing out both concentric and eccentric, that's what fatigues the muscles, because most machines especially don't do that. But now with the biofeedback and the technology, we can really measure what we're doing. I mean, when I first started weight training, we're writing it down in our little journals and stuff and trying to calculate. And the great thing about some of the machines is, like the ARX machine, is week over week I can see my progress, or I can see bad days and good days, and I can really start to measure what's going on, which is really awesome. But two, I'm always challenging myself. So that's right there on the screen. I'm like, I'm not gonna let last week beat me, right? So it's really fun just to watch and see the progression, and it's these little wins. It's the little wins of life that really make life sweet. It's the little things. I think we're always looking for the big wins, and we're missing the little ones, and just the little successes, these little things to feel good about. And then sometimes we're off, and that's okay too. So I think one thing I learned a lot of life lessons in my treatment story. I still can't believe I told the full story out loud, but that's okay. Is one thing that we did, one type of therapy we did for recovery is called somatic therapy. And soma means the body. And somatic therapy, what we did was, a lot of it was we have our therapists in the room, so they know what this is. But it's getting in touch with feelings in the body where they're located. And at first, understand, I am very grounded. I'm not woo-woo. So there's not a lot of woo-woo in me. Although now that I've been through my journey, I have a lot more woo-woo in me than I ever did before. Because now I see things a little differently. I'm like, oh, I would have just called the bullshit on that. But now I actually see some universal principles at work there. But somatic therapy, it would we'd have to get in touch with locations of the body of where we felt things. And so I'd notice, like when I'm scared, I feel it in my stomach. Like my stomach really, I'll get butterflies and that sort of thing. When I'm angry, it's like in my neck. Like I can just feel it, and I tense up, and I'm pissed off or angry or whatever, and my shoulders will come up. And when I'm scared, I feel it like in the back of my neck. I'll just like these shivers in the back of my neck. So it's really cool. Like it was learned. It's like really get in touch with the body, and how, like the lessons for me, and so much, like I said, so much of this, but how amazing our bodies are, number one, including the brain, and how there's just so much wisdom here inside of our bodies that I think we're so in our to-dos all the time, we're not in touch with our bodies, we're not in touch with our minds, we're not in touch with what's going on. So now I can feel things, like now I can feel it before I can think it. So I know I'm scared before I think I'm scared. I know I'm nervous before I can think I'm nervous, because now I'm getting so in tune with my body. It's like I know, and then I can adjust my thoughts to cope or just to accept. So a lot of what I learned too is just acceptance. Like you can't be happy 100% of the time, like life is life. And it's like, oh, well that's fear, or that's anxiety. Maybe anxiety is the best. That's anxiety. All right, I've identified it. Okay, I'll just sit with it until it passes, and it always passes until the next thing comes. And really just getting more in touch with and being okay with whatever we feel. So when it comes to all of this, another thing is, and we'll talk about this in the practices session coming up, and if, for example, a practice meditation, but I'm starting to notice how the separate parts of our bodies. So for example, I can think and feel very differently. Before, I was just always in my head, like there was no distinction. And as funny as it sounds, I talk to my brain and my body. So I'm me, whoever me is, and then I'll talk to my body and I'll say things like in my meditations or my journaling and different things I'll talk about practices, I'll just be like, thank you, body, you rock. You're so strong, you have me up here for 3 days, you're giving me this energy, you thank for sleeping last night, and I actually thank my body. But being the practice of thanking my body makes me wish to take care of it. It puts me in touch with it, because where are we without our bodies? Again, when I was sick and lost my mind and my ability to do anything with my body, it gave me a new appreciation for it and not to take it for granted. We treat our bodies like crap. Some of it just because we don't take care, and then some of it is that sort of the mainstream wisdom is telling us the wrong things, and so we're hurting our bodies unintentionally. But it's really like to get one with our bodies, and I think is how we start to feel good enough and feel good about ourselves, is getting in touch. Like, thank you, body, you rock. It's not about being a size 0 when I was 22. It's about you just are still standing here and performing and creating, and thank you for that. And then the mind piece. So much we think we're disconnected. We're just like exercise and diet and exercise versus, like I said, there's more to health in our body than just that. But we're forgetting like the neck up and what's going on in the mind. And so much new neuroscience is teaching us the pathways and how we can produce our pathways. And I want you to know that the physical, besides all the physical sickness I had, I lost my brain. My brain was so inflamed, the toxicologists and the doctors did not know if I could ever get my brain back because it was just that inflamed. And I mean, I couldn't formulate sentences. And you'll notice even sometimes I'm still working on my brain, and why I'm still working with my brainwave biofeedback, and it's this feedback thing. Remember, we can do feedback and measure and see what we're doing. It's training my brain how to rethink. Training my brain, like I still struggle recalling certain words, and sometimes it takes me a few seconds, like I have to catch up. And so I'm still working to train my brain, but even the distance I've come in like a year and a half from not being able to formulate a sentence, like I couldn't have a dialogue with you. Like I could sit here and look at you and understand what you're saying, but I couldn't put the words together to try to respond. Like I couldn't even get there, and I just couldn't. I couldn't function, I couldn't think. And I know there's something I knew I could say, but I couldn't put it all together in a way to complete it. So to see again, like what we can do with training our brain, and we're learning so many new things with diet and things, creating things like Alzheimer's and some Parkinson's and some different things that autoimmune disease, just all these things, we're learning that diet can fix a lot of it. But then also the work, the practice to really remember the intentionality, like with intention, create the pathways to create the way we want our brains to think. But it's all the process of being very in tune and aware, self-aware, aware of our bodies, aware of our brains, aware of how we want to think and how we want to be, and separating ourselves just from the doing all the time, getting in the busyness. Life is very fast-paced, and the only way to do that is to create some space, is to create some intersections, to get out of just that rat race, that go, 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 go. And that's going to be there already, so intentionally we have to put intersections or stop gaps or whatever in there so that we can get more control over our lives. So I don't even know what got me on that tangent. I'm very sorry. And my whole team's like, Christina, shut up. You already have us 15 minutes over time. So on your tables, we have some goodies for you. And we have some things here for both your body and your mind. And in your bags is Bulletproof. Has anybody heard of Bulletproof? So some people have heard of Bulletproof. Bulletproof is Dave Asprey, and Dave Asprey has a podcast. He's a biohacker, and the guy is like Mensa smart. He's taught me so many things about my body. He's how would you explain Dave? Like not everyone believes what he's saying because he's very aggressive in the way he teaches and what he believes, but the guy has a lot of evidence. So, but really what Dave teaches is he teaches the idea of, it's all about high performance and hacking your brains and your body to produce high performance, really with the idea of the most output with the least amount of input. So you don't just max out for maxing out sake, you just figure out like what is the max needed to get the certain level of output, but it's all about high performance. And again, where many times where we're missing is we're missing the food to the brain, the health to the brain. And mainstream science is saying, you know, most of us are low carb now, but it's been low fat. Fat is bad. Don't eat fat. Fat makes you fat. Now, granted, there's good fats and bad fats, and we don't have time to go in that, but most of you already know this anyway. But fat is good. Especially as women, we need to get over that fat is bad, but all of us, and fat creates his heart disease and cholesterol, like all of it is nonsense today. So what Dave's come up with and others will, at our next event, I'll be bringing in even some people I love, that's the Coltons, and they just wrote a book that was supposed to be here, but the post office lost our books, by the way, that we'll send them to you. But it's called Rich Food, Poor Food, which is really revolutionary in some of the thinking from the Coltons, who they have an incredible story. But they have some great products too. But with Dave Asprey's products, a place to buy, but it's to get good fats for your brain. Now here's the thing, our brains need fat. Our brains are made of fat, they're mostly fat, and they don't do well with sugar, but they don't use protein. So the only way for our brains to get nutrition is high fat, good fats, grass-fed butters. I was one thinking butter's really bad, and some of us, I know there are some of us in the room that still don't really necessarily agree with butter, but that's one source of fat. Coconut oil, organic coconut oils, but coconut's a pure source, avocados. So there's these really great sources of fat, and we want to feed our brains fat, especially in the morning. So the reason why we've made the Bulletproof Coffee, which is the brain octane oil, and we only put tiny amount because until you sort of acclimate to it, it can cause some stomach issues. So you go up slowly in dose, but this is, it's MCT oil, it's a special kind, but it's just sitting, we put it in our coffee, we put ours with butter to get the benefits of the butter and the MCT oil, the coconut oil. And Gary and I do that, lots of us are doing it, and I just can tell you, like my brain now with the fat is just so much sharper in the morning, and I've got my get up and go. But it's just giving your brain what you need, and doing high fats versus just protein and just carbs. So that's some of the goodies in there, but to be the brain, and Dave Asprey's all about the brain. His Bulletproof Coffee is his special coffee that's supposed to be like toxin-free, mold-free. He's big into molds, and molds make us really sick, so he's put his quality grade on coffee. But with coffee, you want to make sure there's good coffee and not so good coffee. Coffee is a really great antioxidant. It has some really good brain properties. But only if it's good coffee, so that's what he teaches a lot of. But that's some of the bulletproof stuff. He's got all sorts of great products on his website. If you're curious about any of them, let us know and we can share a little bit about that. And then the body stuff, this is called Milk and Honey, and they are a local spa in town. Alyssa's a good friend of mine, and so they donated this. This is all donated, by the way. Everybody wanted you to sample some of the stuff. And everything we're giving you is stuff that Gary and I and Tamara and David and others use. So none of this is just given to us. It's like we went to people that we really are passionate about and that we use in our daily lives to share it with you. But Milk and Honey, these are found in Whole Foods. They're luxury products, and so one of those bottles is probably $100, believe it or not. And they donated those to give you a sample, but it's all pure. If you look at the ingredients, there's no bad stuff in there. Most ingredients, when you look on the back of products, is you don't even know what the words mean, and when you study what all those words mean, they're very, very dangerous. Lots of carcinogens and cancer stuff in all these products, especially women, we're putting on our skin. And we're going to have a woman that's flying in from Minnesota tomorrow to talk about that, who has a book and is going to talk just about the crap we're putting on our skin and the dangers of that. Again, just stuff we don't think about. And something on that note that I really loved in her book and what she taught me is that, for example, we're really worried about all the food we're putting in our bodies, which we should be, but our bodies have these natural filtration systems called the liver and all these other systems that help detoxify. And so our bodies inside have these really great detoxification systems, except people like me that genetically don't have it, which is part of the reason why I got so sick. But when we put stuff on our skin, what happens? goes straight to through our bloodstream, to our organs, doesn't go through our liver. So we're not even thinking about that. Again, we're like focusing a lot of body. I'm like, oh shit, that's true. Just straight in, and our body has no ability to detoxify it. So especially as women, we have all these products and stuff, and Anne, for example, she has a lot of products at her office that are all natural. Makeups, like now, I have makeup on now because we're filming, but I don't wear makeup anymore. I use coconut oil on my skin, that's it. Just because most of the stuff is poison. But we're bringing in some really great products that if you are concerned about that, at least there are some choices out there for pure products. Yes?
What about the sun? Like, I use a lot of sunblock.
Sun is good. So that's another thing. And I'm not an expert, so like the reason why Anne's a good friend and I adore her and she's part of saving my life. So like you'll tell me, like I'll just gush about her all the time because I adore her. As a friend, as a professional, she's as good as it gets in the entire country. And she's wicked smart. She's a functional medicine doctor. She'll tell you what that means tomorrow. But it's a very different type of medicine. It's a different philosophy. Remember we talked about philosophy? So it's a philosophy that's very different than traditional medicine. So when you meet with a functional medicine doctor like Anne, there's not a lot of them. They're very expensive, $750 an hour, I think, not covered by insurance. So, and all the supplementation and everything, but functional medicine is very different than traditional medicine. She's the expert, so I say surface level layman stuff that I understand for myself, but then I go to her and then other sources of knowledge to get my real answers. But what I'm learning, and the reason of saying that is that I'd actually look to Anne to see if she agrees with this or not. But what I'm learning is that most of us are vitamin D deficient. Almost everyone?
Yeah, I think something's going on with how much we actually take the oils off of our skin. So the sun, even people that are getting 20, 30 minutes of sun, which is supposed to be the amount that we're supposed to get, even people that are doing that on a daily basis with sun exposure, or skin exposure and no sunscreen on, because clothes and sunscreen both block that vitamin D absorption. Even those people are often seen very bad vitamin D deficient. So almost everybody needs at least 5,000 units of vitamin D a day. The nice thing about vitamin D though is that it's very slowly metabolized. So you could actually take a week's dose in one day. Take it once a week. That's how I do it. So it's one that's every day.
Oh. So most sunscreens are filled with really bad stuff.
Yeah, so environmental
Yes.
Reserve, I was going to talk about that tomorrow too, has an amazing site where they talk about, it's a cosmetics database, so anything that you're using, you can go look up and see where it's ranked and what ingredients are toxic. And then, so you can go in and pick some of the best products and find things that you like. And then they also have a sunscreen app that you can download onto your phone and know what sunscreens are safe for you and children and grandchildren. It's awesome. Oh, there's also a fish that's which fish are the safest. And then they also try to put in some of the fish that are least fish, so that you can also kind of be a good steward of the planet as well as finding safe sources. So really, it's in research. So EWG.org.
EWG.org.
Yes.
Okay, Environmental Work Group. Okay.
So yeah, take a look at everything. And then I think we've been sort of brainwashed or schooled to think that we have to have sunscreen, otherwise we'll get skin cancer. And yes, please, I'd rather you talk on this.
So what I tell patients when we get on this topic is just don't protect your face. Is that the skin on your face is so much more delicate than the rest of your body. So I think most people really do feel better if they get some real sun on their body, because I think it's doing other things than just activating vitamin D, which is the sense of well-being that you get after being in the sun. If you're not feeling that sun well, it's dramatic. So protect your face, sunscreen on, and then
So get some sun without sunscreen. Just don't go out and lay there and burn yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have to put on sunscreen every time we go outside. And wear hats and cover the face and, keep the lines at bay a little bit longer. All right. So anyway, that we'll have more. We'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow. But that's all the stuff that we use and we're giving you is all certified by us, if that has any meaning. And so on that note, just the reason why these are so important to me is what I've learned about myself with Anne's help is I actually have a lot of what's called genetic mutations where my body can't detoxify properly. And many of us in this room might have some of these, so that's why it's important to get some genetic testing so that we know what supplementation or what to avoid. But my body doesn't detoxify on its own. It needs a lot of help. And even with the supplementation, it will never perform the way it should. So for me, I'm now very conscious of everything I put in and on my body. All right, so enough of that. I'm not an expert there, so I'll leave that to the pros that are coming tomorrow on our Wealthy Wealthy. So we're going to talk about now. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Tamara? Is that good? All right, so.
Actually, there is.
Yes, what?
Some of you may realize that we've been taking a lot of photos today and yesterday. And we've been posting them on Facebook. We have not tagged any of you, some people prefer their privacy. We would obviously want to honor that. But if you do go onto Christina's Facebook page, then, and tag yourself, we would love it. It'd be great if you want to share that. And we've got some photos this morning from people maybe enough to go at 6 a.m. So just go with yourself and have some fun with it, and feel free to make comments and join in on the fun and talk about it. And we're hashtagging everything as wealthy wealthy. That's me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks all for being some participants. It's Lori.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to jump into the money talk. So we've talked about promises, we've talked about philosophies, we've talked about psychologies, we've talked about some proficiencies, and we've talked about purpose. So now where we are is process P. And the process P means the money process, like how we process our money in our marriage. So this is the money word. And we're going to do some money work today with our honeys or just on our own, in our own books individually. So process is what I'm calling in the book. That's basically the Falling for Money book is the money process. Now, if you spend any time with me, nothing stays the same very long. So I'm always evolving and iterating. And I think that's another lesson is that I think we think here's the starting place and here's the destination and to get there as quickly as possible, which certainly there's some truth to that. But again, when we're so destination focused, we miss the journey. We miss the love of the process. We miss the iterations. And I think life is iterative. It's just, it's like computer programming now. We used to, programmers used to try to build the entire database, the entire system they were going to sell in one fell swoop. But now everything's iterative. You just build a little bit and do that and then iterate and, evolve and add on and learn and adjust as you go along. So to me, that's life. Life's an iteration. And it's enjoying the iteration. And what to be iterative means, what that means is you have to fail a lot. You have to test a lot. So you have to get really good at being okay with failing. I mean, I probably fail 100 times to have one success. And it's like, okay, now the only time failure is not a good thing is when you don't use it to iterate, to make a change, to make an adjustment, to question, well, that didn't work, I wonder why. And I think that's even where Tamara, she may or may not agree with this, but I think I can say this would be true for her, is when she came into the entrepreneurial world, that's what was most difficult for her. Because I'm like, oh, that didn't work, no big deal, we'll try something else. And she's like, ah. And I'm like, so what? We, spent 20 grand on that. It didn't work. She's like, that's $20,000. But that's just it. Like, nope, not that. Nope, not that. No, oh, this is, it's working, it's going. And so that takes us into a word called flow. Now, flow is another thing I've learned. Like before I didn't even get flow. It was too woo-woo. I'd heard the topic. And to me, flow now is everything. My life is about flow. So before it's get shit done, this order, sequence, tackle it, to-dos, do it faster, not good enough, do it again, not perfect. There we are. We're not there yet. When are we going to get there? Another to-do list, task list, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you know. And nothing necessarily wrong with that, other than it was just very militant and determined and get it done. And I mean, can you see my face? Just talking about it? And I think that's where my frown marks come in, is because I'm just people are like, are you angry? I'm like, no, not at all. I'm really happy. And they're like, really, your face isn't showing it. And now it's not. Now I mean, that's like boom, 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 boom. And now my life is so much different, and it really is far more joyful and happier. And it's just because I really work to be in a state of flow. And life flows now, and it's not predictable. Like, I try to set everything predictable and enforce things and put them in my order and structure because it seemed very safe that way. And very determined and predictable. And I've just learned, especially with my breakdown, did I ever think I'd be in a treatment facility? No. Did I ever plan that or want that for my life? No. Did it end up being the greatest thing ever happened to me? Yes, but that's not the point. It's now life's about flow. And the great thing about flow is it's just things flow to me, they flow through me, they flow out of me. It's being in the flow, and it's a way of living that's, to me, very much more joyful. And being okay with the unpredictability. And that's that faith. Remember the faith one? And this is where the faith comes in. And think of water with flow. Now, what happens to water when it doesn't flow? It's stagnant. It's smelly. Even what happens to water when it's dammed up?
It ruins things because it overflows.
Yeah, and it's there and it's contained, but what's the momentum and power once you let the water out of the dam? Flow, energy, momentum, rapids, slow, ups, downs, sideways. And what can rivers do that have flow? What can they do to canyons, to rocks? The Grand Canyon, you think that river completely created that thing. And so I think the universe is flow. The rivers flow. The whole system flows. It's just in motion. The universal energy is in motion all the time, way beyond what we as human beings can see or figure out. But I just invite you all to really move, maybe, since we're all type A, most of us, and that's just, we're sort of built that way. So it takes a lot of letting go as type A's, OCD, control freaks, get it done, get towards the, destination as fast as possible, to kind of let it go and let some flow happen. Now, it doesn't mean woo-woo. So what I don't mean is like people that are too far into flow, then their life doesn't turn out because they're not in action, they don't have strategy, they don't have destinations, purposes, and plans, and the things we talked about in other P's. So that's still necessary, but don't let that be the purpose. Is like, remember, that's just we have to be in these things, but to go with the flow. Be able to, wow, I didn't know we were going to take a right turn there, but I'm going to go right. I'm going to let this carry me and see. So flow is just, it's an energy. We want things to flow. I think life is better when it flows. So what does that have to do with money? Part of what I've worked to design and what Gary and I do is what I'm going to teach you next and how we flow our money. So the way I'm trying to invent this and change it is again, I think what you'll see is a lot of what we're bringing to you is like non-mainstream, non-traditional. It's very much the new science, the new medicine, the new things we're learning, new brain stuff, everything I'm just bringing you. If you stick with me, I'm just a seeker. I'm out there learning from the best of the best, from the best experts I can find or I have relationships with, and I want to bring them to you. So stick with me. I'm just going to keep bringing the best of who I know. I'm not the expert, but I'm surrounding myself by those who are wealthy, right, in all these categories. So with everything, it's like trying to invent it's about inventing a new way of being, new way of thinking, a new way that matches more of what we know now versus being caught in old traditions. So a little bit of my short part, my short duration of real estate fame is what I was known as an innovator, was a disruptor, as a thought leader, I guess. That's sort of a trendy term, whatever that means. But in the real estate, I was sort of breaking the old way of the traditional real estate industry. And I just because it didn't make sense. Well, a lot of money in the study of this hasn't made sense. And I have an accounting degree, and I worked for Coopers and Lybrand, and so, I have some background there. And the way we were taught, though, and a lot of the study I've done since then, it's about this very contained way of moving your money, and very financial planner, and very dry and old school. And there's elements of that, like the fundamentals are true, but the way it's taught and spoken, I think, is about restraint and constriction and putting things in these budgets. And it makes us feel bad about money because, we're trying to restrict and not spend and not do this. And I think it really sort of fuels some of our psychology we have with money and can get in the way of relationships. And it's maybe a more traditional way of doing money that was based on check registers and the old ways people had to do money before we had computers. So in the new way of money, the way I'm sort of inventing this based on the way I'm seeing it and just based on where I am in my life, I'm just bringing who I am to this, is thinking money differently. So thinking of it in budgets and constriction and restraints, and put it this way. And I want it to be money is a source of flow. So the goal moving forward is, as we go into this process, I want us to think of money a couple different ways. I want you to think of money as flow. Money is great flow. And so the goal, we don't want to budget our money. We want to flow our money. We don't want to budget into a box. We want to flow it in the different directions we want it to go. We want to flow. We want it to build. And then think of flow. Think of rivers. What happens when you start getting the momentum going and the route? Think of the energy. So money's the same way. Once it starts flowing and starts building, it just compounds and it builds and it builds. But only if we flow it. Now, sometimes we're doing that based on some traditional ways, but I want to reshape our mindset a little bit about how we flow our money and how we approach it, especially how we use it in our relationships. So think of money as flow. And what we're going to talk about then are these 5 parts. So the first part of our new system, we're going to talk about money, the money method, is the first part is be raw. And what raw stands for is the reflection and assessment of our wealth and wealth. Well, you've already done that. That really is the 7 F words. But before we start talking about money, what we want to know is, what is that wealthy life we're after, so that as we start flowing our money, we know why we're flowing it. What's the purpose? So this is the purpose of our money. Remember, the money's not the end. This is the end. The rest is just the means. So that's the raw. The second piece is what we're calling get kissed. And that's, this is called our cash flow income saving and spending system. So this is like a new word for budget. So this is a cash flow system versus a budgeting system. And that's what I'm going to teach you now. So, and then later in the day, we'll talk about these other parts. But there's 5 parts to money. Oops. I just laugh at my writing. It's so bad. All right. So the first part, the first thing we want to start doing with our money in our cash flow system, and we're doing it cash with a K. So you can remember my name starts with a K if you want to. But there's a reason for some of the naming. Remember Jim Quick I talked about yesterday? So what Jim Quick teaches is memorization techniques. And the reason, here's the technique. It's pretty simple. Do you want to know it? Okay. So the key to how our brain works and how we restore things is that there's 2 parts. It's called location and imagination. So location is where we put things in our memory, store them, where we intentionally store the memory. And then 2, imagination, is we have to create some sort of ridiculous vision for something we want to remember. So an example, like one way that he has us do this is you think of your house and think of your living room and think of 5 places in your living room. So for me, I have my bookshelf, I have my TV, I have my sofa, I have my lounge chair, and I have my coffee table. So we don't have time to go through this, but I'm going to go very quick just to give you the idea. But you choose your 5 locations. So that's your location. And you have all these different lists that he teaches, but you have all these different locations to hang things. So any memory you want to hang, you hang it on a different hook. So each of those locations are like a hook. So for me, if I want to remember, let's say I'm supposed to bring books tomorrow, okay, for everyone. Well, I'm the first one. I'm thinking a million things a minute, probably like all of us. And then I get someplace, I'm like, damn, I forgot the books. Has anybody done that before? So now the idea, or you write it down, but you don't always have time to write things down, so you think you remember it and you can't, you just forget it. So the memorization technique with some practice is it's like, okay, I need to remember to bring the books tomorrow. So I go to my first hook, which is my bookshelf in my house, and it's always the same. You have your same list. And so this is a 5-point system, but I have 10 places in my house, and you have all these different location lists, but to make this one simple. So then I think, okay, I need to remember the book. So what do you think how am I going to remember this book?
Put it on the bookshelf.
On the bookshelf. Now here's the thing. That's what I would have normally thought too. I'd think, okay, the way I'm going to remember the book is I'm going to put it on that bookshelf. But there's no imagination in that. So what memories do you remember most? Think of what memories do we have? What do we remember from our history? Happy things. Yeah, but things that are memorable. So we do a bazillion things every single day, but we don't remember our drive to work today. You know, that we do every single day, or what might have happened. But if there was an enormous car accident and there were a million cars and sirens and dead bodies and blood everywhere, and you were stuck on the highway right behind and saw the accident, you're never going to forget that because it's unusual. So that's what we remember. So we remember these things that are out of ordinary. So the more creative we can be with making stuff up, the easier it is to remember, which is very hard for me because I'm just a very practical person. So imagine the ridiculous is a skill I'm trying to learn. So now what can we do to make this like something? So if I just put my book on a bookshelf, that's too ordinary, so I'm not going to remember it. So what would be a way that would be very imaginary and creative and ridiculous, exaggerated, that I could remember the book on the bookshelf?
Take duct tape and put it on the back of it, put it smack in the middle of your TV, and then a huge red bow.
Yeah. So the location, but the location we're putting it is on the bookshelf because that's location 1.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bookshelf and a book. So I even have to be more imaginary because I'm putting it on location 1 because you want to remember things in order so you can always go around in your head and see what's all hanging on that hook until you take it off. Yes.
Give it to the pink elephant.
So there's a pink elephant with a book. It's now sitting on the bookshelf. Would you remember that? Maybe. So then I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to remember? I know I'm supposed to remember something. Oh, a pink elephant. Oh, it's got a book in its mouth. It's on the. I need to grab the books before I go to the office. So it's really as simple as that. That's the memorization technique. And it just takes practice, and you create different lists, but now I'm just always hanging things on hooks. And I still forget things, but now I have to remember to put things on the hooks. But when I do, I don't forget. I'm like, oh yeah, I should put that on a hook. But that's as simple as it is. So with memorization, what we're working to do is part of my own memory technique based on what I'm learning is to change things to make them memorable. So the 7 F words. Well, F words, I can remember 7 F words, and I've got my ways to remember those. Cash flow is boring, but if we do cash flow with the first letter of my name, I can remember this more. And I can remember the order of these and the 5 steps and this and that. So be okay, again, for those of us that are very pragmatic and real and predictable. Some of this can be very difficult, I'm not the most creative person in the world. So, but I'm trying to get better at that, to make things memorable, to make things stand out. And especially with businesses, you want things memorable, right, to customers, and they can remember, and you want to be a little bit unique and different without being too clever and where it gets to the point of being ridiculous to others. It's okay to be ridiculous in your own mind, just not necessarily outwardly. So that's why it's K with cash, so we'll remember it. So the first part is called cash flow chart. And we can look at this two different ways. It can be cash flow chart or cash flow chart. So as a cash flow chart, it's the new name for like a budget, for the tool for a budget. And it's very simple, but what we're going to start doing is we're going to organize our money in a very specific way. So this is the cash flow system or the KISS system. It's organizing how we're going to start organizing our money so we can flow it very specifically. So it's a very specific system that I'm teaching you. It may work for some of you, may work for most of you, it may not work for all of you. But at least you can see this system so you can see how you might be able to incorporate at least elements of it into your own life and marriage and how you do your books. So the cash flow chart is these are the different parts. So it starts with our gross cash. So our gross cash inflow, which is basically our income. But income's a boring word. What does income mean? Revenue is a boring word. What does revenue mean? So, but can we all think of lots of cash inflow versus revenue? Like think of cash. Do we want a lot of cash inflowing? Income's boring. Like so increase your income. Cash, like I can, and so here's the visualization technique. Let's imagine cash flowing, incoming, just piling in. It's flowing in. Think of rivers of cash flowing in. That's even better, floating on rivers of cash. So cash flow. So cash flow, our gross cash inflow, which is all our income coming in. Now the first thing, do we get to keep all the cash we make? We don't, do we? So good old Uncle Sam gets Uncle Sam's cash. Now, for many of us that are in a corporate job, that's taken off automatically. For those of us that are business owners and entrepreneurs, what do? We have to set it aside. Now, part of the reason why I had $100,000 of tax liens, in my early career, is I didn't do that. I just spent all of this. So Uncle Sam gets paid first. That's what Uncle Sam gets, and so that goes. So that's a cash outflow. Now, the second idea here is we need to pay ourselves second. So where most people get themselves in trouble is they're waiting to invest what's left over. Most of us in this room, that's not the case, but it comes out here as part of the cash flow chart. This is how the chart, it's a very, taxes first, investment second. And what that leaves us is what we call spending cash. So spending cash. Now, spending cash means spending cash. This means we get to spend 100% of what's below that line. So this is about spending. This is a spending plan. We're taking our investments off. Now we get to spend. Who likes to spend? Spending's good. Now, we're going to leave this here for now. I'm going to talk about how we spend this cash and how we categorize this here next. But this is basically the cash flow chart. We take our cash inflow minus our taxes minus our investments gives us our spending cash, right? And sort of the goal here will be to net out zero. Now the spending cash we put, just for later so we know, it's called a home operating account. I'm sorry my writing's so bad. So all this money practically will flow into this, and we're talking household here, we're not talking business, although business works very similarly. But we flow this into a checking account, which we call our home operating account. So all of our income comes in. We're going to talk later where we flow our taxes. We're going to talk later where we flow our investments. This is above the line, and then we're going to talk below the line. So I'm just giving you some description here so that you know what we're talking about moving on. Okay, but all this money now is going to sit in a home operating account for later use. Does this make sense to everyone? Pretty simple? Again, I am making this so simple. Number one, I'm not the smartest person in the world, so the simpler the better. But also, I think we complicate our lives way too much. And I think sometimes we get satisfaction out of it being more complex. We feel better about ourselves. I did that, and I'm so over it. Like, I want things to be as simple as possible. They just flow and they're simple so that when I do need to use my brain power, I've got it. I don't want to waste any more time on stuff that doesn't matter. I've done a lot of study on decision fatigue. Have y'all learned about that at all and read some about it? So some of the latest science, what we're learning is that our brains really, any given day, we only have so much energy. And our brains take a lot of our energy day to day. And so really to simplify it, it's like we get so many energy points a day. And decision making takes a lot of energy. So what happens is we spend so much of our time making decisions. But most of our time is making decisions on what doesn't matter. So before I cleaned out my closet, I'm beginning so simplified that I usually wear Lululemon to work most days. I'll go to a meeting with a billionaire for coffee, my friend who's the ex-CFO, like the past CFO of Dell, and he's a good friend of mine. And I go to a coffee meeting at Starbucks in my Lululemon. And he doesn't seem to have a problem with it, right? It's like my rules. I'm going to do this my way. I'm very confident in my Lululemon. Like, I don't have to dress up anymore. But it's not about that. It's about before I did this, I'd go to my closet. What would I do? And I'm not good with makeup and clothing and everything anyway, so to me it's just overwhelming. But I have this full closet, all those rods there, all those rods there, and all those rods there, and all those shoes down there. And I'm like, what the fuck? What do I wear today? And I hate deciding what I'm going to wear. So what's the first thing I'm thinking of is, I hate this shit. What am I going to wear today? Right? Now, some people love putting it all together. I suck at it, and I don't wear jewelry. So then what belt should I wear with that? And what shoes? And I'm like, God, just kill me now. So my first thing I'm doing, decision fatigue. I'm using all this brain energy on decisions, like who cares what I wear? Really, sometimes it's important, but most of the time it's not. So for me, it's just one of those things, like I'm taking that decision out. I hired a wardrobe consultant that came in. She took those stuff out. She said, okay, there's this, these things can go together. It takes me 2 minutes to get in and out of my closet every day. Now, I got fake eyelashes. So now I don't even have to put on mascara. 2 minutes can get my clothes. Usually it's out of my drawers, Lululemon. My fake eyelashes are so pretty and long, I don't have to do mascara. Sometimes I put on lip gloss if I'm really, ambitious. I get ready before Gary does every day. Almost. We're pretty much the same time. But the whole idea is that I think we add so much complexity to our lives and so much added drama and so much this. And now I'm so over it. It's like, just simplify. Decision fatigue is real, is what we're learning. I want my decision-making power so when I need it, so that when I do need to decide and it's actually consequential and real, I've got it, right? And I've not wasted all my energy points, all my decision points on stupid stuff. So the goal really is to get pattern, to really make our lives very routine. Like Gary and I don't really decide what we're going to eat every day anymore. Like, it's a salad every single day. Why? Because how much energy did it take to say, okay, what are we going to do for lunch today? Now we have Brenda. Brenda makes our lunches. Now we have Brenda. She makes our dinners. We go home. Gary puts a few things together. Done. Simplification. And it costs a little bit of extra money. But guess what? That's why we do this over here. Simplification. Gary loves to cook. But does he love to cook every single day after being tired from work and we work our asses off? I'd rather him cook when he really wants to and it's meaningful and he's not tired and he puts all this love and goodness in the food, and Brenda does too differently, which is why we hired somebody versus going out to eat every single day. But it's simplifying Gary's life. I just see him be so tired and come home and cook for me and the family because I can't boil an egg. And the kids like, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. And it's like, get rid of the drama, get rid of the frustration, get rid of the extra, and just be, just live, just simplify. So simple. Everything I'm going to teach you today is so simple. And it's so simple and it makes you rich at the same time. Who's up for that? Okay. All right, so that's the cash flow chart. The second part of the system, of the KISS system, is what we call cash flow categories. All right, so I'm going to do a different color here. Oh yeah, we could do cash flow categories. There you go. These markers aren't all that great. Let's see. So cash flow categories. So again, we're going to start out the same. We have our gross cash inflow. We minus our taxes. We minus our investments. And that leaves us what? Our spending cash. Okay, so I said we get to spend all this. Well, some of you might be thinking, well, where's savings and some other stuff in that? So I'm going to teach you a different way to think about savings, is we get to spend to save. So the cool here is this is all about flowing. We're going to start flowing this money. So now we're going to start flowing our spending cash that's left after after all our personal income. And we're going to start flowing it into different categories. So this is really key. I think this is what really makes a difference, especially in marriages, because this becomes part of the agreement, is talking about how we flow. So we're going to spend all of this, and here's how we're going to spend it. The first thing is our ARM. So this is a new word. I made it up. And ARM stands for Annual Required Minimum Expense. This is at the bare minimum. How much does it cost to live our lives every single year? So annual required minimum expense. So these are required expenses. I'll talk more about these in a second. But these are the have-to spending, meaning it's consequential if you don't pay it. So what's an example of something that if you don't pay it, there's a consequence? A mortgage. Right? So you have to pay your mortgage. So your mortgage would be in your ARM. Now, what about these shoes? Probably not so much, right? We wouldn't put that in our ARM. But most of us, when we do our traditional budgeting, we're just putting everything into one thing, and it's just in there, and we're trying to manage it or reduce it, or we're spending too much, whatever it is. But it's very important that when we start flowing our cash, it's very intentional, lots of intentionality, it's flow. But we have to be very precise and specific, and now we know where we're going to flow it into these different categories. So that's the ARM. The second thing we're doing is what we call our luxuries. And this is what's different than traditional budgeting, is we're separating our ARM from our luxuries. Now luxuries, I use the word luxuries for a reason. Again, very intentional. Why would I use the word luxuries here? They're not necessary. We live in a life of luxury in this country. I don't know if you've traveled anywhere else in the world. I've lived in a third world country for over a year. I came back to the States and realized how lucky we are. So we live a life of luxury. So it's so easy that we get used to living in a way that we think these luxuries are required because we get accustomed to this. And it's all mixed up into one budget. So we're not really distinguishing between the two. Well, how we get rich through flowing our money is we start distinguishing the two and being very selective and agreeing on these things that we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's luxuries. The next thing is our savings. We're going to spend to save. So we're going to cash flow. We're going to flow money. We're going to flow cash into savings. It's a whole system, which is a SaaS system, again, that I'll talk about here later on. So it's determining our savings. And then finally, it's debt reduction. That's another system that I'll teach. Now, most of us in the room we don't have personal debt, but if we do, we want to know how this fits in. But it's important because I'll show you how it all goes together. So that's it. That's the cash flow categories. We have the above the line categories and we have below the line. But we're going to spend everything month to month. Now, it never nets out really zero. You'll see that. But the idea is sort of more of an idea that you're looking at spending 100% of what you make every year and 100% of any month. But here's the final key to this. You're going to spend a certain percentage of your spending cash. So nothing is off gross income. So this above the line, this is not your money. So this is a big key here. Is Uncle Sam's money your money? No. Not if you want to stay out of jail. So investments, the way to think about investing and the way we think about it is your investments it's not your money. Why not?
Access it.
Here's the reason why. it's not your current self's money. It's your future self's money. Because we're going to have this future self 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And our future self is going to need some income. So when, let's say 25 years from now, our future self is going to say, thank you, current self way back then. You did such a great job of taking care of me. So this is not your current self's money. This is Uncle Sam's money. We pay Uncle Sam first. We pay our future self second. It's not our money. So just like the stuff that comes off our paychecks that we never see, that's not our money, that goes to taxes or go whatever, we think of it like the mindset here is exactly the same. So you don't even think about it. It's not your money. It's just off somewhere, wherever we put it, for our future self. And then that becomes a whole different game and a whole different level. You know, it's a whole different conversation for investment. And we've brought some investment experts in that we'll talk about on the money wealth piece on tomorrow afternoon and give some ideas for that. But the idea here is that this is a whole different conversation. Everything else we're going to talk about is below the line because this is our day-to-day life because the top's not our money anyway. This is our money. This is what we work with on a regular basis. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. And that's it. So that's the cash flow categories. And what we'll do from here on out is we're going to break each of these down and look at them and talk about them and do some work with them. So what time are we at, Tamara?